This is the most important thing I learned as a public adjuster, and it will matter to contractors as well. So listen, I remember very clearly in 2012, I had a roof claim that changed my entire career. It was wind damage on Atlas Chalet shingle, which is a discontinued shingle. There's no like kind of quality available. There's nothing compatible. You can't make repairs to it. I made those arguments on this roof, and they said that they wanted to give me a repair only anyway. You know, a lot of the crap that they give you guys today. They were doing that back in 2012 as well, just not as often. I made lots of arguments. I showed them that they were wrong. I gave them policy language. I basically made it very clear that if they're going to continue to deny this, that they're acting in bad faith. And they came back and they said the following, and it changed my entire career and outlook on how I run claims. They said, we're going to pay for this roof, but it's not because of what you said. And I thought to myself, okay, why does that matter? They were very adamant in telling me that it wasn't because of any of the arguments that I made. They were just going to pay for it, and I needed to know that it wasn't because of anything I said. And at that time, I was like, you know what, whatever. As long as you're paying for the roof, then my client gets taken care of, and that's fine. But I had to think about that for a long time. Why would they ever do that or say that? Why would they go out of their way to say that when they could have just said, we're paying for the roof? They didn't have to say anything more. And the reason is that sometimes we make arguments and we put them in a position where if they agree with us, they implicate themselves in bad faith, or they set a precedent for future claims. If we're going to make them agree with us and now they have to do that thing on every claim going forward, that's setting a precedent. If we're asking them to define something that isn't defined in the policy, or agree that something is or isn't damage and it doesn't say one way or the other in the policy, if there is some kind of a way that we're putting them in a position where they're going to have to stick to that answer for future claims, they're not going to do it. If they are going to implicate themselves in bad faith by agreeing with you, agreeing that they've been wrong that whole time, they're not going to do that. Why would they? Their legal department doesn't want them to. Instead, what they'll say is, our position stands. That's not warranted. Sue us. And the reason they're doing that is because once the suit is filed, they can make a offer that is a compromise settlement. And that compromise settlement gets rid of all the arguments that were made previously. And if the policyholder accepts it, they didn't end up with any kind of a precedent set. They didn't implicate themselves in bad faith by agreeing that they were wrong. They just made a compromise settlement. And they want an attorney to get involved so that they could go through a compromise settlement discussion via numbers and not necessarily a line item by line item or prove that they were wrong. Does that make sense? That's crazy if you think about it. If we paint them into a corner where they have to admit that they're wrong and that sets a precedent for future claims, they won't do it. Our position stands. That's where they go. If you ever hit a brick wall like that, you need to understand that you have just put them in a position where they're going to set a precedent or implicate themselves. And the only thing that you can do at that point is hand it off to an attorney or transfer the claim into a compromise settlement discussion yourself. For you public adjusters out there, you're allowed to do that. Hey, I talked to my client and we have agreed to accept a compromise settlement in the amount of X. Now you better have actually talked to your client and gotten them to agree to that number. Please reach out to your management and see if this is something that is willing to be done and get back to me as soon as you can. They won't always go into that kind of a negotiation style with you, but often they will because it allows them to avoid hiring an attorney and going through litigation also. And then you can just argue the compromise settlement amount. You can push them into it as well. Hey, listen, we both disagree on this. It doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong at this point. I have to take care of my client. I've had a discussion with them, and we don't need to keep going down this rabbit hole and whether or not something is owed or not owed, whether the policy says this or that. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, I just need to help my client be able to make repairs. So we have discussed it, and we are willing to accept a compromise settlement offer in the amount of X. And if you'll agree to that, we'll sign off on a release. If you move it to that kind of a negotiation style, you'll still win the case without having to go to litigation. And now you're not going to litigation so much anymore. I hope that helps you guys. It changed my entire perspective. I don't paint insurance companies into corners anymore because it puts them into that position.